Overnight hours, warm and humid, a low of 69. Currently, 74 degrees. Your next news is at 8. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by On Target Radio. From firearms and Second Amendment rights to personal freedoms and government intrusions. Listen here Sunday nights at 9.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Daddy, what do taxes pay for?
Oh, why, everything. Policemen, trees, sunshine.
On AM 560.
And let's not forget the folks who just don't feel like working, God bless them.
The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. And yeah, red light cameras are part of that sort of backdoor tax. Red light cameras come to Chicago and many outlying suburban communities. They're not everywhere.
But don't you know where they are now? Because I just avoid those intersections altogether.
Well, I mean, it's tough to avoid all the intersections downtown if you're driving downtown in the city center where a lot of red light cameras are posted. I've gotten my share of those tickets. They are deployed in 24 states. And, of course, as much as politicians jawbone them and talk about their sort of unequal application in minority neighborhoods in Chicago, that's been an issue for opponents of red light cameras, those that have sought to undo the red light cameras. But you know what happens? Politicians enjoy the revenue that they so desperately desire, particularly in bankrupt cities and states like Chicago and Illinois. And the otherwise docile electorate gets inured to it. I mean, since they've been installed, where's been the real push here to repeal, to take down?
The red light cameras.
You know, because, hey, what are you going to do? You can't give up that revenue if you're a politician, right? And even though it's unfair and may more in philosophically undermine some semblance of the rule of law, we get money. The populace doesn't care that much. You know, we have a black mayor, and that's all they really care about is identity politics. So yeah, I don't like red light cameras, but you know,
Do they really keep us safer? I mean, I contested one of them,
and
the judge can pop it up in a second. You just approach the bench, and he can, with the computers can show you the violation. And I said to the judge, I said, Your Honor, am I supposed to throw it in reverse? Then I'm at the point of no return. I'm halfway through the light. It turned yellow. What am I supposed to do? Back it up? And I got out of that ticket.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only time.
Well, that's a question whether or not red light cameras are
Safe.
Constitutional violations. Well, safe, yes. There's the practicality question, and then there's the rule of law question. The practicality question, the research is dubious on whether or not they enhance safety on the roads. But for more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Joe Barnett. He's a research fellow and managing editor of Budget and Tax News, publication for the Heartland Institute. Joe, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dan. Glad to be there.
So you've written an op-ed on this topic. You argue, let's start with the philosophical and the constitutional, that red light cameras are essentially a violation of our Sixth Amendment rights. Why?
Well, under the Sixth Amendment, you have a right to confront your accuser, and that is why traditionally you had to have an officer present to witness in a traffic offense in order to issue a ticket. Here, you're confronted with a camera, and there's evidence, depending on the system, that they may not be as accurate depending on where they're placed and how good a quality the image is, where they put the stripes, as to whether an actual offense has occurred, technically speaking. But you don't get to confront that evidence. You just have, as Amy was saying, image, and that's it. Pay up.
Well, how do they determine where they're placed, which intersections?
High traffic areas.
Well, that's a good
But there's
question.
high traffic areas in all, pretty much every intersection if you're going down Irving Park or Western. But who decides? Who plays God in all this?
That's done by, to a great extent, that's done by the companies themselves. They're in charge of maintenance and installation and supervision of the systems. And so theoretically, these are supposed to be placed at high areas where there's a high rate of accidents.
Right.
But as you mentioned, the research has shown that sometimes the accidents they're trying to prevent, which are people pulling into the intersection and getting hit in the side or hitting someone else in the side, those accidents may go down a little, but what you have is people rear-ending other people as they try to desperately get through the yellow light. And by the way, the yellow light timing of the yellow lights, that's an important consideration there, because what the studies have shown, if you lengthened the yellow light by a second at intersections where you have these cameras, the number of violations go down.
Right. We had that here.
And
We had that here in Chicago, where the yellow lights were were actually a violation of state law. They were too quick, and then the city had to refund a bunch of people who got tickets and so on and so forth. But with respect to the placement, though, I just want to go back to that for a second. So there's also the political calculation. The companies are, the municipalities aren't just saying, yeah, go ahead and place them wherever you want. They're saying, place them in areas where we're going to generate the most revenue. Yes, we certainly want data that these are also intersections where there's more traffic accidents so that we have a cover story. But it's all about revenue, number one. And then number two, it's about politics. So in the ward system in Chicago, depending on the particular attitude of the alderman, you may have more or less red light cameras. You may have them in more or less politically advantageous precincts. So there's absolutely a political calculus at every level of the deployment of these cameras, isn't there?
Oh, certainly. And there's, that feeds into the whole traffic court system, where those that can afford attorneys tend to, accumulate a lot of fines and get them considered en blanc, as opposed to regular folks who can't afford an attorney, who end up, paying the fines.
I mentioned at the outset that there was a bit of resistance when these cameras started getting deployed, but in terms of any organized opposition or any successful revolts against red light cameras where they've been taken down after being deployed, there's not too many examples of that, is there?
Well, oh yes,
There is?
where they've been deployed. Well, not in Illinois.
No,
yet,
right, okay.
but in California and in Texas, a number of people have local citizens at the city municipal level have gotten up petition drives and gotten propositions put on the ballot, and every time voters have had a chance to vote on this, they've overwhelmingly voted to ban the cameras.
Oh well, yeah, we don't do that
and
here.
that's
We don't
happened
let
more than
we don't
45 times.
we don't let voters vote here. That's the difference. Yeah, we don't have such. So yeah, that's of course that explains the difference. But that's happened. You said 45 times.
Yes, at least here in Texas, where I'm located, in my community, Arlington, Texas, we had a citizen initiative, got on the ballot over the opposition, unanimous opposition of the city council. People voted to ban the cameras. A state legislator took up the cause because he realized it was so popular.
Right.
And just here in June, Governor Abbott of Texas signed into law a statewide ban. And
That's right.
Must be
everybody was
nice.
pretty pleased about that.
Yeah,
Think
that's
we could
right.
have that happen here, Dan?
Yeah, I remember we
Yeah.
covered Greg Abbott's statement on it too. That was great. No, that's great. But yeah, that's just the difference. Like that's a it's a political culture difference. I mean, remember Texas also has a state legislature that meets once every 2 years and does 2-year budgets. They don't have a professional political
That's right.
class like here. But that is a good point. Greg Abbott in Texas and what's done and what's been done by citizen initiative at the local level around the country. I guess that's an encouraging note if we had any citizens with any initiative here.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, yes. In California, 82 local cities have voted to ban the cameras. That they have the local option there. And so there's also federal legislation. Congressman Ron Wright of Texas has introduced a bill that would withhold highway funds from states that don't enact. If they have red light cameras, they need to regulate them and monitor them for things like violations of people's procedural rights and constitutional rights to due process.
Have there been any federal cases that are going anywhere with respect to challenging the red light cameras on a constitutional basis as a Sixth Amendment violation, as you said?
There are some cases in the Ninth Circuit Court out in California, to my understanding, challenging the some constitutional aspects of the red light and speed cameras systems. The same folks make both and have deployed both. So there's a little jurisprudence on that, but it's those cases are kind of working their way up to the court system.
Do you think that any of them will be successful?
I think as far as now, the situation varies from state to state. In many states, it's a civil fee or administrative fee, and here in Texas, for example, the only way they had to enforce making people pay up was to threaten them that they couldn't renew their driver's licenses because they didn't want it to go through the court system where people would have more due process rights. So the more rights they have, the more it's like a regular ticket. I would think the less constitutional problem it presents.
He is Joe Barnett, research fellow and managing editor of Budget and Tax News.